Hello, everyone. Hold on, let me.
Hi, sir.
All right, can you guys hear me okay?
Yeah, I can hear you well.
The question is, can I hear you okay? I should. Can I get an amen from somebody? Mic check.
Amen. Amen.
Amen.
Feel like I just am talking, but I'm not hearing that. Let's check this. All right, so for today, we're going to be jumping into the user interface of Photoshop.
Sir, can you hear me
Aha,
now?
I can hear you now. Beautiful.
Uh, Sir, can you give me a few minutes? Photoshop is kind of like loading for me, like downloading. Sorry.
Oh, downloading, which is different from loading.
Yeah, downloading. Sorry, I forgot the down part.
Well, no worries. I am going to give you one of the videos from today because I don't think we'll make it through both. But nonetheless, here we go. I'll give you the video from what we will do, the example from today. All right. So come on, where are you? Tools? There we go. Okay. Audio. And we want to use. Okay. All right, let's do an audio test. To make sure that everything works. Welcome, everyone. Welcome, welcome, welcome. What am I looking for?
Sir, do you want us to respond or you're just checking on your end?
I am just checking on my end. So, let's see. Because I think today, I don't know if I was getting the audio. All right. Are you guys hearing anything?
Sir, somebody's waiting for you to let them in.
Oh, I thought I disabled. Okay, hang on. Um, I don't, hold on. Yes, no problem. I see them. All right, cool. All right, are you guys hearing the audio play in the background? No, you're not hearing anything? Oops, oops,
I can
oops.
hear you.
Pause. Okay. You can hear me, but could you hear that audio just now?
I heard something like something very low.
Yeah. Yeah. It's probably through my headphone mic. Hold on.
Sir Williams, amen.
Yes.
Is it possible for us to use Procreate?
Procreate, you say? Well, there is no space because we have to basically spend the time to go through Photoshop and Illustrator. So Procreate doesn't really check the box of what we want to check. And guess what? For pretty much for the first 3 or 4 probably the first 3 computing modules, you're going to use the software that is stipulated, and then for the rest, you will use your own software. So for the exercises, we're collecting the actual Photoshop file. So you have to use Photoshop. And for example, the actual Illustrator file. But don't worry, that is coming soon. All right, let's check this again. Oh, that's loud. That is so loud. Oh my goodness. Hopefully I didn't deaf anybody. Are you guys getting audio? Did that audio test work?
I didn't quite catch it, sir. Sorry.
No, if it worked, you'd have definitely.
Sir, could you please let Kalia in?
Hold on, I thought I disabled the waiting room. Hold on, I see nobody in the waiting room. Okay, probably I have to close this. Okay. Probably I have to close this and open it back for this thing to work.
Never mind, sir. She just joined in with me.
Ah, okay, good. Okay, welcome to our working class. Come on, thing. All right. Let me try this again. All right, so you guys, I don't know why you're not hearing anything. Are you sure you're not hearing anything? Nothing? Not hearing anything play in the background?
No,
Okay.
sir, I'm not hearing anything at all but you.
Oh, okay. Hmm. Sorry, it's for the tutorial. CAIO, I did choose that. Okay, I probably just have to, I don't know, use something else. All right, let's open up Photoshop. I'm opening that on my side. Oh my goodness. You know why you wasn't hearing anything? Because I wasn't sharing audio. Oh wow.
Yeah, I was gonna ask, I was gonna ask if you decided to share the audio alone or you did not share it at all.
Hey, let me tell you, it's always the simplest solutions, I'm telling you. I was like, what is happening?
I'm glad you got it to work though, sir. I'm very happy
All right,
for you.
cool. All right, guys. So we're gonna check out Photoshop. So we're gonna do this in two halves. We kind of learned what what Photoshop kind of has to offer, and now we're going to dive into the user interface. Now, even if you don't have the program installed, well, there's always the class recordings, right? But the more important thing is for you to get the exercise done, right? So when you open up Photoshop, it may look a little different. My Photoshop shows a lot of past projects that I have open. That's what your own will probably show as well. All right. Is there anybody using CS6? Anybody in the CS versions of Photoshop, or is everybody like 2000 something?
2023?
Yeah, but is anybody? So if you're using like the computer, I don't know if they updated the ones in the lab, but also if you are using CS6, some of these things will be a little bit different to you guys, right? All right. All right, so when you open up Photoshop, and some of you might be doing this for the first time. Where are we? We are here, Photoshop. Yeah. Okay, welcome to perhaps your best friend throughout CSA. We're gonna dive right into new project, and you should see a window like this open up. Might be a little different on everybody's screen, right? So let's check this out. Let's take a look on Photoshop. So we're gonna open Photoshop now. Now, I'm using version 2020, but it doesn't matter which version you use. Most of the techniques for using the user interface can apply across all versions. All right, so you guys can hear me okay?
Yes, sir.
All right. All right, so you're going to fire up Photoshop now.
Sir, your screen is blurry.
So some of you, when you open Photoshop, you will notice that you get a kind of a welcome screen, and sometimes it might carry you directly onto the work page that has your artboard. So it doesn't really matter. If it carries you to a welcome screen, what is really showing you is some of the projects that you were working on. So these are actually some projects that that I was working on, you're going to go to create new document that's located over here. All right, now when you click that, you're going to notice that it comes up with a window. Now this might look different, as I said, depending on which Photoshop version you're using, but you should notice the same ideas here. You should see the name, which is the name of the file, the document type, so that's selecting whether or not it's going to be on paper, it's going to be a web document. You're also going to choose your resolution. Now, for our purposes, just getting used to the interface, what we're going to do is we're going to just choose US paper. We're going to leave it on letter size, and we're going to leave everything as default here. And we're going to choose OK. Now, when you do that, this is what you might see. Now, all right, so everybody by now should have on their screen a letter size, and if in case you have this user interface, you're going to go to print, then letter, in case you have this newer one, and we're going to choose portrait. Now everything else we're just going to leave as default because we will learn it as we go on. So letter size and choose create. What was the question you were asking? Somebody was asking a question. Yeah, man. I'm okay. So don't worry, I'm here with my virtual self, so I can always
Sir,
repeat.
that video that you're playing earlier, is it on the platform?
That one isn't, but the one with the exercise is. Because what happens is that
Okay.
I interject sometimes depending, and versions change, right? So I've updated
Sir,
it.
so the one with the exercise on it that we can just watch and just follow.
Yeah, I have the exercise separate.
Okay.
Right. But
All right,
before
no
we jump
problem.
into the exercise, we just have to kind of understand the user interface that we're working with first, especially that some of us are using Photoshop for the first time. All right.
Sir, and this video, there's a video for this class, active class. Will there be one?
Yes.
Okay.
So every class is recorded and updated. You should see one there for the last class, I think. All right. We'll go through that near the
All right,
end.
sir. No problem. No problem.
All right, cool. First thing to notice is your Photoshop layout might not look like my layout. And for those of you who maybe are used to a certain version of Photoshop, you might notice that, hey, okay, this other version looks different than what I'm used to. So the first thing that we're going to do is kind of just demystify why they all look different, because at its foundation, all of them are pretty much the same layout. As a matter of fact, Photoshop hasn't really changed for over the last 20 years. It's gotten more fancy and it has a black theme, but ideas are the same, right? You have your major zones. On this side here, we have our panels, and on this side here, we have our tools, and at the top here, that's all the way up here, we have our control panel and our menu, our drop-down menus up top. So that's pretty much the three default zones that you get. Now, for some of us who might be saying, whoa, these are a lot of buttons. What do these buttons do? Now, the great thing about this tutorial is that we're going to kind of learn Photoshop in less than an hour, right? So we're not going to learn what every button does, but we're going to learn how to learn what the buttons do. So let's start with a broad brush, right? Now, on this side here, let's think of these tools as our general tools. What do I mean by general tools? Well, think about tools, something like perhaps this. I mean, this is a scissors. We might find this in most of our homes today. This is a general tool that that we might have in any typical home. Maybe like a hammer. Give me another general tool. How about I don't know, you could take any one of these. Pliers, screwdrivers. These are all tools that you will see generally around the house. Any typical person would have. Now, the idea is that on this side, you might find that we have some icons here. We may not know what these icons do, but you can feel safe and assured in knowing that they're general icons that's going to be used throughout whatever we're working on in Photoshop. Now on the other side now, what we have over here are specific tools. Now what do I mean by that? Well, tools that you don't normally find in the typical home. For example, this. I mean, it's not a typical knife, it's a surgical knife. You wouldn't find the average Joe using a surgical knife to cut bread or to open a screwdriver. It is very specific. These tools, like what a dentist would use, it's very specific. It's used to clean teeth. It's not a general tool like a hammer that can have multiple purposes, right? You know, maybe this, and we might say, okay, I don't even know what that is. Some of us might say, okay, that's definitely a specific tool used to do something specific, and I have no idea what it is. Now in this case, this is something that's used to do tattoos, right? So maybe if you're a tattoo artist, you would recognize, hey, I know that that's a tool that you use to do tattoos. But chances are all of us would recognize that that is a scissors. So you can kind of think of these tools, or rather this zone, for the specific tools, right? You use them to do specific things depending on what you want to do. Our analogy, we had a surgical knife, so if we want to perform surgery, well, that tool will be on this side. Maybe we want to build a tattoo design, well, that tool will also be on this side. But maybe you just want to cut a piece of paper, well, you would find that tool on this side. So these are the default setup for the different zones, right? You have the general tools on this side and the specific tools over here. Now the thing is, what you have in the center up top is, think of it as your options that applies to your program, to your entire program. All right, and we're going to look into that. We're going to get a bit more into specifics as we go along. So now that we know what the zones are, what about the zone that's right in front of us? What are we looking on here? Well, this is known as our canvas, right? This is where the magic happens. And you can manipulate your canvas by using the mouse wheel, holding down Alt and using the mouse wheel to zoom, and holding space bar and left clicking to pan. Now in this case, I don't need to pan because I'm seeing all of the paper, but if I zoom in, then I might need to pan around like this. All right, and what I'm doing now, I'm holding space bar and left click, which is normal click. Now once I hold space bar, notice that my cursor changes to the little hand that you see here. So that means I'm now in pan mode. And when I click and hold, I can be able to move this around. So that's pretty much how you get to move around. You're pretty much going to be holding Alt to zoom and holding pan to pan around. All right. Now I also want to highlight this section down here at the bottom of our screens, right? And if we notice down this side, we see a percentage that we can see here. Oops, that's a little big. And that's right down here. There. Additionally, we see some numbers here, and we're going to get into that when we go into the lecture session when we talk about resolution. Now, what I want to highlight to you is that when you zoom, which is holding down Alt and using the mouse wheel, notice you see that percentage changes, right? So this basically tells you what size are you relative to the actual size of the paper, right? Basically telling you how much you're zoomed in and zoom out. Now it does give a little bit more information than that, but we're gonna discover that as we go along. Usually in an application, the bar at the bottom down here normally displays status, things like the amount of RAM, things that have to do with your zoom and your view and all of that stuff. That's normally displayed down the bottom section here. Now what we're going to do now is kind of explore the interface a bit. So what was that? Oh, was there a question? Nope.
I have a question.
Yeah, go ahead.
Where do we get this notation?
As in the application?
Yeah.
Well, one resource, the official resource is to use it in the school lab. And the unofficial resource is either from the lab tech at school or you can talk to Mr. Campbell.
Sir, who named Mr. Campbell?
Oh, I gave that number out at the beginning of the class. I'll put his number in the chat again. Right?
All right, so we kept getting disconnected, that's why.
Okay. What happened?
I was saying I kept getting disconnected in the earlier session, so I didn't get the
Okay.
information.
All right, cool. I want you guys to follow along as we try to learn a bit more about the interface. Now, if you have messed anything up, I want you to now go to, or even if you haven't messed anything up or moved anything around, just to make sure we're all starting from 0, I want us to go to Window. This is for everybody. And I want you to go to Workspace. And we're going to go to Reset Essentials, right? And what this is a type of workspace layout for all the icons and all of that. And what it's going to do is reset it to the default, right? So this is the default for my version of Photoshop. Now, I want you guys to follow very carefully because what we're going to do is manipulate the user interface. And while we're doing that, we're going to learn some tips about Photoshop. Now, if you look closely on your right hand side, now this side, remember, houses all the specific tools. Now, notice you have some tabs here. You can move these tabs around. There are going to be quite a lot of buttons. If we look down here, we can see all of these buttons and areas to type in, and we might be saying, okay, what in the world are all of these buttons for? Now, before we even start to investigate what they're for, what I want you guys to do, I want you guys to follow me, to just kind of get a feel of how this interface interacts. I want you to highlight, let's choose one of the tabs. I'm going to choose color, and I'm going to click, left click, which is normal click, and hold on the color button, and I'm going to drag that out like that. All right. Are you guys with me? How much people have the Photoshop tab ready? And you have reset your workspace to essentials. Anybody?
Sir, how do you reset it again after for 1 second?
Right. So you go to Window, Workspace, and then you just choose Reset Essentials. So Essentials is the name of the layout. So meaning that you can save profiles. So for example, when you have your Android phone and you can save your profiles, like how you set up the icons on your phone or whatever, it's kind of the same thing. Where do you put your icons and those things? So when you hit reset, this is the default that Photoshop comes with. So it looks something like this. All right, so that
sir,
is,
thank you.
yeah. So I want you guys to, when you reset it, it looks like this. And before we get into all of the knobs and switches and stuff, I want you to look for the color panel and just hover over the name color and just drag it out and release. All right, cool. Let's continue. I'm going to do the same for swatches. I'm going to drag that out. Now you may not have some of these tabs open, but you will have tabs on this side of your screen. I want you to click and hold and just drag them out. Now I want you to do that
Sure.
to all of them.
I don't know if because
Okay,
I'm using the
guys.
tablet, is my iPad, but
Uh-huh.
I'm not seeing that the color icon.
You're not seeing the color tab. Hold on. Are you using Photoshop Rush? Can you say you're using a tablet?
Because
Because
let me
that's
see
not
what
the full version of Photoshop.
I'm using Photoshop Adobe.
Right. So that is a totally different version of Photoshop
Okay.
compared to, right. So in order to do the exercises and stuff, you will need to get that other version. All right.
Okay.
And hold
Is that
on the
Adobe
keyboard,
Photoshop,
and I'm
sir?
going to drag that
Yes,
out
correct.
like that.
Oh.
I'm going to do the same for swatches. I'm going to drag that out. Now you may not have some of these tabs open, but you will have tabs on this side of your screen. I want you to click and hold and just drag them out. Now I want you to do that to all of them. So things might get a bit crowded, but don't worry about it. I want you to just drag all of these guys out. Here I have, now in some cases you might have a button that's here. When you click it, you might see it expands into a tab. I want you to drag that out as well. All right. Now when you drag them out, I want you to drag them out as individual windows. So some of them might tend to join up with other windows, but I want you to drag them out as individual windows. See, I have a Learn tab here. I'm going to drag that out, make that by itself, and I have a Libraries tab. So pretty much I have now disengaged all of these tabs, and they're all floating in the middle of the screen. Now, the reason I asked you to do that is I want you to notice how all of these tools are pretty much flexible. Now remember, we took all of these from the right hand side, which houses the specific tools. I remember we discussed specific tools before. There are tools that has a primary purpose. So things like what the dentist would use, and things like what you would use for a surgery, right?
All right. So are you guys there with me so far?
Right.
Yes, sir.
All right, cool. All right, let's keep it up. Things that you would use to do specific things like do a tattoo. So all of these examples here are examples of these windows that we have just dragged out, and each of these windows does a specific thing. You notice they all have different options, varying buttons and all of that. And don't worry about them too much because we won't be using every one of them. But think of this as if you were a surgeon and you are now coming into Photoshop to do a surgery. Well, you would look for all the tools that has the features that you want. So maybe you will have a scaffold tool, maybe you have some kind of cutting saw, maybe you have some kind of swab,
you know, you would drag out all of the specific tools that is necessary for you to perform your surgery, using that as an analogy. So that's all these panels are, and that's what Photoshop calls them, titles them. They are panels. And there are many panels in Photoshop, definitely more than 50 panels. These are only some of the panels that starts up with Photoshop. Now, to kind of get the feel so that we can know what these panels do, I want to highlight some aspects for you. So first, let's close all of these panels that we have dragged out. And if you notice on each panel, there is an X, there is a little double arrow symbol, and there is also the name, right? So these, and there is also a menu button here. So every panel has these 4 elements. For now, I want us to close out these panels, so we're going to be clicking on the X, and we're going to be closing these guys out like that. All right.
All right. So you guys should have an empty screen when you're done.
All right, great. Now, if your Photoshop had opened looking like this, you would be like, wait a minute, where are all the tools, right? But now you've discovered that, well, on the left side, it's general tools. I still don't necessarily know what these buttons do, but I know they're like the hammer, the saw, the screwdriver. And what was on the right side were specific tools that are used to do specific things. They're more precise. And I realized that I could drag them out and close them. Now, you might be saying, okay, how do I go about opening back these specific tools? Now, the specific tool that we're going to be using for this exercise, we're going to be using the color panel. And to open the color panel and all panels, you're going to go up to the window menu. And when you look in this list here now, this list is actually a listing of all the panels available to us in Photoshop. So I want us to go ahead and open the color panel by clicking that. And you're going to notice that the panel comes up. Now this is one of the panels that we had open originally, and we had closed them. And to open the panel, we would go here. Now there are many panels here. Some of them I've never even used before, but each of these panels, as I said, think of them as specific tools: the scaffold, the welding rod, the surgery tool, the dentist tool. That's what these are, right? And if you do particular types of work in Photoshop, then you might be used to your particular tools. So anyway, we have opened the color tool, and that's where you can notice that there's a little tick beside it. So that's how you know that the color tool is open. Now, when we open the color tool, I want us just to understand how panels work. So before, remember we said that we realized that the panel has a title. You're able to close the panel. You can minimize the panel. And then each panel has their own panel options, right? Now, the actual panel now is where the meat of the matter is for this particular tool. So for example, if we took up that tool that the tattoo artist uses, well, all of the buttons and knobs located on his tool will be located in this space here, right? And in this case, this panel is called the color panel, and it has its features. And what it does, it allows you to change the color of whatever you're working on. Now, I can resize that tool, make it smaller, and I can also minimize it. Now, when I minimize it, it turns into a little button that I can expand. When I click it, it expands again, and I can even minimize it all the way down to an actual icon, right? Let's maximize that again. All right, great. So now we understand how panels work. Now I want us to open another panel. Let's go to Window, and we're going to open the Layers panel. That's what layers look like there. I also want you to open, let's go again. We want you to open the History panel. And let's go again and open the Swatches panel. Now, if you had pulled apart your panels earlier, then when you open them back, they will still be apart, right? So some of you might open panels and they might be together like this, where you see swatches and history together. Well, you just need to pull them apart. Now the idea is that these are the panels we want to use to do this activity. So we're only going to use these for now. Now I want us to arrange it in a particular way, right? Let's give you a recommended way. So layers are going to show you lists of layers here. So you're probably going to want this panel to be long. As a matter of fact, I want us to just dock them side by side. So I'm just going to dock this here. I'm going to dock that there. And I'm going to dock swatches there. So now I have my own little custom panel dock right here. And what I want us to do is we're going to go to Window, Workspace, and we're going to go to New Workspace. And we're going to call this DDM. At least that's what I'm.
Right, guys? So what we did a while ago was to save our own workspace. And because we can attach panels together or detach them, remember we spoke about the specific tools. So for example, if you're in a welding shop and your specific tool is a blowtorch and a pliers, then that's the tool that you need to have ready to go. So depending on what you use Photoshop to do, you might have certain panels that you have readily accessible to you. And this is essentially what we're doing. We're kind of getting rid of the panels that we're not using. So properties, we don't need libraries. We can delete that. Adjustments, we might come back to that later. And you have all of these other panels like layers and channels and paths and all kind of stuff. And when we arrange how we want our panels to be, then we just go to Window and Workspace, and we can create a new profile. Kind of like a launcher. And anybody know launcher on Android? Anybody changes their launcher on Android? Anybody mess with their phone? No?
It's like a customizable UI, I guess.
There you go. And then you just save the UI that you customized. All right.
I'm going to call it. So now when I come back to my Photoshop, if somebody else was using my computer, and this was common in the computer labs, you might be used to your panels a certain way, and then you come back and then it's all over the place. Well, you can just go back and load your workspace settings right here. Right here it is, DDM. Okay, great. So now we kind of understand a little bit of where things are zoned and how to manipulate panels. Now I wanted to share some basic fundamentals of Photoshop, right? And in doing so, these are the main panels that we're going to use. Now, up until this point, I expect everybody to have a page open. That's going to be letter size. And they should have these panels open, only these panels. All right. And at this point, I'm going to actually save this file so I don't lose it in case because we're in the middle of this activity. So I'm going to save it to my desktop and I'm going to call it DDM. All right. Now notice when you're saving a Photoshop file, the default file type is PSD, right? If I click this drop down list here, I can see that I have many other file formats, including we probably are used to things like JPEG and PNG and TIFF. But we're going to save this file as a Photoshop file, which is a file native to Photoshop, meaning you need Photoshop in order to open it. If we save it as another file type, we might end up losing some of the editable abilities. So we're going to name the file and we're going to save it there. And now the file is saved. Okay, guys, so.
All right. So is everybody with me so far?
Yes, sir.
All right.
Okay, so
let's keep
now
going.
we're going to tackle the main exercise, and in doing so we're going to learn how to use Photoshop at the same time. Now let's head over to the class website, and when you head over to the website, you're going to head to exercise 1. You're going to see the handout open, and exercise 1 is going to be all about enhancing environment and entourage. We're going to learn how to do a background sky replacement, and we're going to learn how to create depth and motion effects using Photoshop filters, right? So in a nutshell, what we're going to do is combine these three
Quick
images
question,
together.
sir.
We're going to take this.
Yeah.
Can I use the Adobe to do this assignment? Seeing that I don't have the other one.
Well, what can you submit you won't be able to do some of the features.
Let me help you, sir. No, you have to find the right one.
No, but it's because I use the iPad, so and I would have to and I look in the group where I have the softwares. I'm not seeing the one for the iPad, so it's kind of
No,
difficult.
no, it's only available for. Do you have a computer?
Yes, but that is at work.
Ah, I get you. Well, okay. We will work out something for you with the exercises, because you need to use the Photoshop to do it. But at the same time, remember our policy in DDM, where it's 1% a day for work that comes in after.
Huh?
But don't worry, we're gonna strike a deal. We're gonna strike a deal, all right? But let's deal with the deal after the
All right,
exercise.
so here my issue now, sir.
Mhm.
So yeah, so this thing that them send me from my phone. But that I can't transfer from my phone to my computer.
What are you using? Like Telegram or something?
Yeah, them give me that Telegram.
Yeah. So use your desktop.
Oh, so I have to go open Telegram from my desktop.
There you go. That's
There you
it.
go. Okay, well, yeah. So because I was doing that, I was going the other route, which was to go straight to the site and try to buy it.
Well, you could do that route as well.
Them don't take money from Jamaicans.
That is
So
also true.
that is their
Not in this region.
Marville, what you have to do, it was saying that as well for me, but you have to go straight because there's a student link, right? Which says the creative thing and it gives like a bunch of different applications and stuff. But if you specifically press on Photoshop alone, it can go through.
Oh, so you can get Photoshop in the region. That's what you're saying?
Yes, because mine was saying that because I was trying to get the student one for $20.
Right.
But if you go on the Adobe site and go to Photoshop, the only Photoshop alone, not the creative thing, and put in your information, it will go through.
I think that's
All right.
How much you buy for?
I'll try it.
And then of course,
$23
for the month.
23 for this Photoshop for the month.
For the month.
Yeah.
Yes, it's a subscription. Yeah.
Yeah, man, just 23. They said 19.
Why don't you guys just download it from the website?
No, don't pick that one, Marville. That one is the student one. You have to go to Photoshop.
Oh, I need to go to the normal one.
Yes, the normal Photoshop, just Photoshop alone, because that one says creative something, don't it?
Creative, what's this? Creative Cloud, all apps, something.
Yes, not that one.
Right,
Go to
that
the
one
one that
is
says Photoshop
regional.
alone.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, all right. Let me try get it. All right.
Right. And of course, if you get it from the Adobe site, you get the latest version. So that's also good.
Yeah.
What's the quick?
Yes, for me, I was using the Telegram way that was sent in the group chat. However, it keeps giving me an error that there is a file that's deleting, like it's not there. The helper file.
Yes, I think because you probably have to disable your
The antivirus.
Windows Defender. Right.
Oh.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Well, yeah, so that's what's been giving me the trouble. So I don't have it for this class right now.
All right. Right. So those would be the two options. And for those of you who use it in the lab, it might be a little different unless they upgrade it. I don't know if they have the latest one in the lab as yet, but that is also an option. All right. But we'll talk about this because normally what we do, I know there are like some technical challenges with the software and all of that. So usually what we do, we give like a 24-hour lead time to submit the work. So that way you can do it the following day. And because it's night and all of that, so those of you who finish the exercise, you would just submit it. And the others of us know, you would have up to tomorrow to submit it. Right? Right. Remember, we're only going to use Photoshop in the first two exercises. So as we're moving quickly. So after this is Illustrator, so we need to do the same thing for Illustrator. And then it's InDesign, and we're going to do the same thing again. All right.
So, sir,
Yeah.
I can get Illustrator and InDesign from the lab as well.
Yes, those are installed on the lab as well. So if you want to use the lab computers to get it, or talk to Kevin, or talk to Mr. Campbell, or go straight to Adobe, whichever options best provide that you can ace the class the fastest way. All right.
I just want to know how to get the software on my laptop. So I know how to use Photoshop, but I haven't used it in a little bit. And I don't have it on this laptop because I recently got it.
Right. So you guys are organized. I guess it sounds like you kind of organize on yourself to get it. So just talk with your classmates. Right?
All right.
Because all you need is the internet connection to download it. So those are your options. And this is why we normally talk to we normally have different options available from the lab to Mr. Campbell, sometimes the lab tech in the computer lab.
Sir,
You have to kind of find your way to get the tools that you need. Yeah, question?
sir, Photoshop available on Mac, right? Like I can go on the site and it will
Most
be
definitely, yes. You can download a Mac
okay. All right.
version as well. Yeah. All right. Let us proceed. Shot of Kingston. We're going to replace the sky with a sky selection of your choice. And then we're going to place a vehicle in the scene, and the vehicle is also of your choice. Now, notice that you have access to the exercise files here, and to give you an idea of what this project will look like, it is going to look something like this. So there's an entirely new sky that is now here. We have the vehicle here, and we have some interesting motion effects here. We even have some reflection going on here. So this is the kind of thing that you would use Photoshop to do. All right, so let's get going. So we're gonna have Photoshop open. Now I want you guys to follow along as we go, and if for any reason you can't follow along, you can always just pause the video, right? Okay, so what we want to first look on is how we open files in Photoshop. Now, if we, for example, download the exercise files, so if we go to the site here and we go to exercise files, it will take us to the folder that has the files that we need. Now, this is the background image that we need to use, and these files here are optional skies that we can use, and here are optional vehicles that we can use as well in the scene. It's up to you. So the first thing we're going to do is download these files. Now, once the files are downloaded, you will know that you will see that they pop up in the location that you have downloaded them to.
The time is 9:02 p.m.
So in my case, I have these files here. Now, I want to talk a little bit about opening files in Photoshop. Now, you could drag the file into Photoshop. That's one popular way. And release. That is what would happen there. Now, I'm going to hit cancel because that's not how I would necessarily want you guys to practice to open Photoshop files. The proper way that I would want you to do it is you would go to File, then you would go to Place Linked. Some of you might be using a version of Photoshop that just has the word place and not place linked. It doesn't matter. So I'm going to click place linked. Then it's going to ask me to browse for the file. So in this case, I'm going to go to the location of my files, which is here. And I'm going to click this, and then it will be placed. Now, you realize that this does the same thing as dragging. So it's up to you which method you want to use. You could either just drag it or you could place linked, right? Now,
notice when you do that, you will get a message up here that says basically to commit or to cancel what you've just did. So what we're going to do is commit, and that's it. Now notice that we have the image on our canvas. Now remember, we spoke about the general tools that's located over here, and what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to drag this out just like how we dragged out the other tools. And to get a bit more to arrange this in a nicer way, I'm going to click this expand button here to expand the tool like that. This is a personal preference because I like to see the tools together like this. Now each of these tools have particular purposes, and when you hover over them, they will actually give you a quick synopsis of what they do. Now, at least for the 2020 version, so it might not do for your version. It also tells you the shortcut of the tool. All right, so I'm going to now place another image here, which is the sky. Now, the last time I used the place linked command, this time I'm going to use the drag and drop command. So here is my folder here, and let's say I'm going to use this sky. I'm going to drag it and release. All right, so did you guys manage to download those files?
Yes, sir.
All right, anybody else?
It's still not take my money.
Oh man, do you have to have a like a US address? It's not allowing you it's only allowing you to choose a state.
Yeah, it's saying that it's not available in my region.
Yeah,
Just pay through PayPal.
That's what I did.
right.
I did through PayPal.
That's what you did. Oh,
Still, give me a hell.
I know, right? I tell you, any one of the options you choose, there is a
Yeah.
challenge. There's a challenge either way, huh?
Yep.
Yes, well, welcome to computing. And this is why, this is why we normally provide, with Mr. Campbell and Kevin upstairs. This module is going to be, you have 4 more years of it. So, eventually you're going to figure your way around. But we're going to have some challenges with, just with navigating the computer. And that's just the nature of the kind of work that we do. All right, so everybody supposed to download the images already. All right, we're going to continue. Don't worry if you're falling a little behind. Remember, I'll put up the video as well. And I'm going to commit that change.
All right, no problem.
So now I have 2 images. Now, in order to move my images around, I need to be on the move tool, which is located here. That's my move tool. All right, so I'm going to make sure my move tool is activated. And notice that I can move this around, and I can also move this other layer around. Now, if I try to click this, it's really not clicking. It's still giving me the top layer. And the reason for that is because I am now locked to this layer here. So now, I'm not able to just select it directly. Now in Photoshop, I want you to notice what happens on this side of my screen, which is here. This image is on that layer, and this image is on that layer. Now remember, this is our layers panel, right? Remember we spoke about panels, which are the specific tools, and this is exactly what the layers panel does. It helps to keep our content organized. Now you can clearly see that there is actually a highlight around this layer here. So that is how you know that this layer is the active layer. And naturally so, when I try to move it around, I'm only able to move this active layer. I'm not able to click on this layer behind here. Now to change the active layer, what I would need to do is I would need to now highlight this layer below. Now notice when I do that, you can see how the highlight box switches between them. Now, depending on your version of Photoshop, you might not have that highlight box. Doesn't matter. Once this layer is activated, now if I try and move, it moves the layer below. And if I try and move the top layer, well, same thing. I'm unable to select it because I have already highlighted this layer here. And I know that it's highlighted because it has this darker color that is there. All right, great. So now that I have these two layers arranged, you might be wondering, well, but suppose I had carried in my sky first and I wanted the sky to be behind the building. Well, how you do that is you actually just rearrange the layers. How it is now, we have the sky layer, and then below the sky layer, we have the downtown Kingston layer. Below that layer, we have our background, which is white, and you can see it represented in the images here, right? We can clearly see that the downtown image is on that layer, and it is below the sky layer, which is here. So right away, you realize that if I wanted to put the downtown layer above, I would need to swap these two layers around. And to do that, all I need to do is to click and hold and drag. And notice you get that little blue line there to tell you that it's now there. So now this layer is on top, and you are now able to see how you manipulate the layers. Now for our purposes, we want the sky layer to be on top, and also we want to call it something that we can recognize. So we're going to double click on the name and type sky. There we go. So now we can see that it's called sky, and we have a downtown layer that is here. Now the next thing we want to do is we want to start to manipulate the sky layer in the background. So I'm going to actually turn off my sky, my sunset sky, by clicking this little eyeball there. So now it's turned off. It's still there, but it's just off. All right, great. So we have our sky there. Next, what we're going to do is
regardless of how big or small, anything you take to an extreme.
Crop this so that it matches with our image. So to do that, we're going to head over to our general tools, and we're going to use the crop icon, which is here. Now crop is a general tool. Pretty much most programs have a crop tool, and we're going to click it like that. And once we click it, notice that we have these highlights here. Now before we start to move this, I want you to start to notice that any tool that you click on in this window here, whichever one is activated, it shows properties for those tools at the top. So now that my crop tool is highlighted, I'm seeing options here that has to do with my crop tool. If, for example, I highlighted my move tool, then notice that the options up here change to options for move, and so forth for all these different tools. Every time I switch to a different tool, the option at the top changes. So anyway, I'm going to choose my crop tool, and what I'm going to do is just to drag in these areas here, and then I'm going to commit those changes by clicking the yes like that. Okay, so I'm going to click that. Good. So now it is there. So I'm going to zoom in now by holding Control and mouse wheel. Now notice I can zoom all the way in, and if you continue to zoom in, you will notice that Photoshop starts to put these little squares, and these squares are actually pixels, which you can see is what ultimately makes up an image. When you're this close, they look quite blocky and horrible, but the more you zoom out, you realize that, hey, these squares eventually come together to show you that image, right? That is pretty cool. Now, the first thing we want to do with our image now is we definitely want to remove this sky so that we can put the other sky there. So the first thing we want to do is to manipulate this layer. Now you need to select the layer that you're currently manipulating. Right now we have the sky layer active, and we know it's active because we can see this brown area there. And the idea is that we don't want it to be the active layer. So we're going to click the downtown layer. Now this layer is active. Good. So now before we can start to cut this layer using one of our tools, we need to change this layer to a particular layer type. Now you notice on each layer there are these little symbols that's located here. So on this downtown layer, I have a little symbol there. And on the sky layer, I have a little symbol there, right? And these symbols tell you the type of layers that they are. Now, by default, whenever you carry an image into Photoshop, it by default makes it into what's called a smart layer. And it does that by default, and we're going to see why it does that as we go further into the tutorial. But this is how you know that these layers are smart layers, right? Now, the thing about smart layers is that you can't edit them. So if we wanted to cut the sky using one of our tools, in this case, we're gonna choose the right. So we're gonna use this tool here, and this tool will allow us to cut out the sky. Now, this tool here is called our lasso tool, and I want you to notice something important about these tools. Now, for each of these tools, you notice that there's a little kind of a triangular icon right there. You can kind of see it again here, and you can see it also on the lasso tool, right? So think of a lasso tool as a way to select something, right? And we use the lasso tool to select an area that we want to manipulate or delete or change in some way. Now, these little triangle here tells us that there are other types of lasso tool, and to access them, what we do is click and hold. So if you click and hold, you will see, and I'm left clicking and holding, you will see that you have a regular lasso tool, a polygonal lasso tool, and a magnetic lasso tool, right? And the interesting thing about this is that you can see that this lasso tool is the one that is currently in use, which is the polygonal lasso tool, and you know that because it has that little highlight right there. Great. So we're on the lasso tool now. Now, basically, what we want to do is try to cut out particular elements of the tool. But if we try to click here, it will not allow us to cut the tool. We have to do what's called rasterizing the layer. The reason for that is that you're not able to edit images that you directly carry into Photoshop, and you can think of this as a kind of safety precaution. When you place an image in Photoshop and it gives it the smart layer, it's kind of a safety net that protects this image from being manipulated. Now, to allow this image to be manipulated, you need to right click on the layer. So make sure the layer is highlighted first, and you're going to right click and you're going to choose rasterize layer. Now, when you choose that, notice that the icon is now gone, and now you can make edits to the layer. So now you have to be cautious, because any changes you make now will actually edit the image. Now, I could try out
Sir, your mic is muted.
Right. Sorry. Right. So I was saying that I noticed that some of you, when you start to do this step and you click in the viewport, you might notice that it gives you this message saying that it can't edit the layer, or error, the layer needs to be rasterized. So you have to remember, once it's a smart layer, you have to right click and choose rasterize. And in a way that kind of allows you to now manipulate the image. Because remember, guys, Photoshop is not just used to, I don't know, to cut out an image and put another image there. You also use Photoshop to change like color, brightness, contrast, and all these things. So when you drag an image into Photoshop, what it does is kind of put it in a smart layer to like protect it in case you accidentally erase something, you know? And you have to flatten it or rasterize it now to get access to those pixels. All right, let's proceed.
this first lasso tool
Sir,
here.
I'm not seeing the rasterize tool.
When you right click,
Oh, sorry,
so
not the rasterize, the lasso tool. I'm not seeing it.
oh, in yours, so you don't see a tool kind of like this?
No, sir.
All right, are you seeing one
So she might
like
be seeing
like
the
this?
superior one. Yes.
Are you seeing the one like this?
I'm not seeing that either, sir.
Okay. Well, if you're not seeing any of, well, you're seeing some tools, but you're not seeing all of them. All right. If you're using the newer version of Photoshop, what they actually did was to compress the tools. So the first way to expand the tools is by pressing this double arrow on the right, and then you get 2 rows. Are you seeing it now? Still no? No, ultimately, if all the tools in Photoshop, they're inside of this little triple button, or some of you have it down here, depending on the version. So that triple button is a sub tool of here. So I actually have to click and hold and then click edit toolbar. And then it came up on this screen. And then you will get access to all the tools in Photoshop. Because what happened is that over the years, the general tools have just ballooned into like, you know, a lot of options. So I'm guessing they can't fit all of it here. So in the newer Photoshop, what they do is they put this if you see the 3 dots here, or for me, I had to hold on here to get the 3 dots, which is here.
Yes, sir. I see the last one now in the 3 dots.
Right. So this, and what you can do now is actually drag that tool. Come on. Or is it, well, I can't drag it because I already have the lasso tool over there.
Yes, sir. I dragged this and I have it now.
Okay, lovely.
Thank you.
Lovely. Right. All right, let's proceed. And your mileage might vary, but I guarantee most of us will not choose this tool. Let's try it out first. We can always undo. So if we wanted to use this lasso tool now, we'll have to now drag and try and manually cut this thing out. And you can see I'm using the mouse to do this, and that's really not going to work. Wow. I mean, this is a horrible cut, but I'm still going to try to use this lasso tool. All right, great. I'm going to come all the way back here and all the way down. And when I get to here, I'm going to just release. Now, once I release, notice I get this. This is called your marching ants, and it kind of looks like marching ants. You can kind of see them there. And this is telling you that I have used the lasso tool to select the image like this. Now, if you tried out this lasso tool, you'd realize that it's quite difficult to try and select the sky, especially using a mouse. So this isn't going to work. So to change this, I can now undo. Now in Photoshop, to undo, you use another panel called the history panel. That's here. So far we've been using the layers panel. So let's see what the history panel does. So the history panel gives us a track of all of the changes that we have made thus far. So you realize that the last thing we did was to rasterize the layer, then we used the lasso tool. So we're just going to go up by one by clicking on it, and there it is. It basically undid what we just did. All right, great. So this time we're going to try out a different lasso tool. So I'm going to select this, and we're going to use the polygonal lasso tool. All right, so let's give this another swing. Now the polygonal lasso tool, it does what it says. It's kind of like a polygon. So this isn't so bad. This is actually great. Now, when you're using this tool, you might realize, oh, I really need to zoom in here. And if you try to use the mouse wheel, it doesn't zoom. Even for some of the versions of Photoshop, if you hold Alt and mouse wheel, it will zoom. But some versions might not zoom. So what you would use is the plus and minus key. So I'm going to use the plus key here. Now you realize that you can actually go right in now, and this polygonal lasso tool gives you a nice kind of angular cut, which is great. So now I can really zoom in and try and cut these elements out, right? Now, this is great when cutting straight edges like buildings, because I can simply, I'm going to do a rough kind of cut here now, but I can simply use this to gauge the edges of buildings. However, when it comes to cutting foliage, that's another story, because now if I wanted to cut this out, I would have to
you know, click all of these angles here, and it gets a little crazy. So I'm going to cancel that by pressing escape. Let's try out another lasso tool here. And the reason I'm showing you these is because these are going to become very important. This is how you put context in your architectural drawings. You might want to insert a car or cut out a tree. Chances are you're going to be using one of these tools. So let's try the magnetic lasso tool. Let's see what that does. Now, to give that a good swing, I'm going to go to the side of the building here, and I'm going to click and release once. I'm not holding down on the button. I'll just click and release to activate it. Now, while I'm moving the mouse, this is actually automatically detecting the edges of these structures here, and I can still zoom in. And what it's doing is actually trying to detect the edges. Now, I'm not clicking, I'm just actually moving the mouse, and Photoshop is trying to say, okay, I think the edge is there. So you can imagine this can kind of make this process a bit quicker. Oh, if you accidentally highlight an edge that you don't want, you're going to press backspace. Backspace is kind of like undo for doing lasso tool selections. There we go. And I can really just quickly highlight a section here like that. Let's zoom out a bit. And I would come all the way back around and where I started, and notice that I get a little plus, a little circle there. I'm going to click, and then it's closed, and now it's highlighted. So that is another way you can use to select. Now the truth is that when you need to cut out elements, the ultimate way to do that is to actually use all, if not most, methods, right? So what do I mean by that? Well, okay, I'm going to first use the polygonal lasso tool. This is my favorite tool. And the first thing I'm going to do is to try and cut these mountains first. I'm not going to try to cut everything in one. I'm going to try and cut the mountains first. So here I go. And I'm going to zoom in, right? Now, remember, the polygonal lasso tool, you have to click to confirm the positions. There we go. Now, you might say, well, maybe I want to use the magnetic lasso tool. There are actually other tools you could use, but for this purpose, we're just going to cut these out using these tools. Now, I know it might seem a bit daunting at first, and you can hear the amount of times my mouse is clicking, but you really get used to it after a while. And what I'm doing here, I'm using the plus and minus keys to zoom in, zoom out, to see where I am, and to zoom in again. Now, this is the trick. I'm not going to try to make one cut and cut everything. Nope. What I'm going to do is I'm only going to cut certain parts. So when I reach near to the edge of the mountain, what I'm going to do is I'm going to zoom out. I'm going to go straight up, come around, back down, and then find back where I started. And I can know that because you see the little circle there. And that is now selected. Now, when this area is selected, you'll know it has the marching ants. You'll see it around it. Now, obviously, we haven't finished cutting out the rest of the building, but my suggestion is not to try and cut everything in one go. So I'm going to cut up to this point here. I'm going to ensure that on my layers tab, I am on the correct layer, which is supposed to be the downtown layer. And then I'm going to hit the delete key. And then that's going to delete the sky there. All right, great. So now it's deleted. Now I still have the selection here. So to deselect, I'm going to right click and hit deselect. All right, great. So now I need to continue my journey, cutting out the rest of these elements here. So you might want to choose what tool you want to use. I'm going to continue with the polygonal lasso tool, and I'm going to continue cutting these guys here. Now, when you're clicking, you want to not try to double click, because when you double click, you actually close the loop. So what you want to try and do is not double click too often. Let's deselect that. So let's go. Oops. I might have, you noticed that I accidentally cut the plan. So I'm going to backspace and go around. Now, the truth is that you don't need to get every single element, because this is going to be pretty small when you zoom out of the picture. So it's up to you to choose what areas you think you need to highlight. Now, if I'm running out of paper, I can move the mouse right, and Photoshop will automatically move the image from it. Just ensure that you don't click. I'm going to hit the plus key on the keyboard, and that will let me zoom in. And I'm just going to continue cutting these guys out. Now the polygonal lasso tool is great, especially for architectural drawings, because you have a lot of angles here. Now, as you can imagine, if you accidentally close the loop here, you're going to lose all of this work. And this is why I always suggest that you don't try to trace everything one time, but you try to get piece by piece. So I'm going to just go around, come back around, and close. And then I'm going to hit delete again to delete that. So I do this and I save because I don't want to lose all of that selections that I just did. Now the building becomes pretty easy because they contain mainly straight lines. So I'm going to cut this like that. I'm going to just cut just like that. Now you're going to want to try to be as detailed as possible. I'm kind of just rushing ahead because I'm previewing this example for you guys. All right, so it's up to you to choose how detailed you want to make your cuts. The bigger the image is going to be, the more that you will see the errors. So if I was doing this for like a book cover, maybe I wouldn't worry too much about it, but if I was going to print it on a large format sheet, then I would worry about it. All right, so I'm just going to make everything go in one go here. Now I definitely don't want to lose this tree here, so I'm going to go around it real quick. There we go. I notice I missed this area in here, but I'm going to come back and get that on my other go. Go over, and so you realize this polygonal lasso tool is doing a good job. All right, so I'm going to cache this in now, so I'm going to just go all the way around, and this time I'm going to just double click and I'm going to hit delete. All right, so this is going good. I'm going to deselect. Let's see what we have here. Oh, we did have this section in here, so I'm going to just use my lasso tool and select in here and hit delete. There we go. All right, so we just have this section that is left, so I'm going to go ahead and start cutting this out. Now the more you do this, is the more you will get used to it, so it might not be as quick for you as it is for me, but that's okay. We all need to start somewhere. I'm gonna grab this polar, so I'm gonna go all the way around. So this is the process that persons will use to cut things out of objects in Photoshop. Go. Now things get a little funny with this section here because this is all organic elements. As a matter of fact, I'm going to zoom out. I'm going to cache that in, so I'm going to go all the way around and double click and delete. Now for organic elements like these trees here, you could, I would rather use the regular lasso tool, because when I'm trying to draw this, my mouse is not going to be straight, but that's great because these things here should be organic. So I'm going to try and do this to the best of my ability here. There we go. And I'm going to come all the way back around and release. I'm going to hit delete to delete that section. So this is okay, but obviously this is not, so I probably want to switch back to my polygonal lasso tool now to grab this section. There you go. I'm going to hit delete. All right, so that only leaves me with this section here, so I'm going to just cut along here. Let's zoom in a bit. Now you can also pan while you're using the tool by holding the space bar. All right. So notice the concept of how we did this. What we did was we got rid of section by section. Now, if I turn off my background layer, notice I will get these checker boxes, which basically represents that the background is transparent. And this is great because now I can turn on my sky layer and I'm going to highlight it. And I'm going to use my move tool, and of course I can move it around, but of course the sky layer is in front and I want it to be behind. And remember how this works. Currently this layer is on top. Ideally I want this layer to be below my downtown layer because I want it to show up behind the areas that I cut out. So to do that, I'm going to just drag this down. There we go. Then I'm going to use the move tool and kind of position this so that it's a bit nicer. It is a bit small, so what I want to do is I want to scale this up. Now to scale this up, you should be able to see these control boxes here, but in case you're using a Photoshop that you don't see these boxes, you need to enable it. And if you remember how this works, remember whatever tool you select, the properties for those tools are located up here. So with the move tool selected, you want to select this tool that says show transform controls. And what that does is it turns on these guys here so you can see them. Mine is enabled by default, but yours might not be. So I'm gonna make sure that is there, and then that will allow me to resize this. So I'm gonna actually make this larger. And you don't want to skew the image. So if you're using an old version of Photoshop, you need to hold shift so you don't skew the image. All right, great. So I'm going to position this so that it's like maybe like right there. That looks pretty good. All right, and I'm going to commit that by clicking the tick up here. All right, so I've now done a sky replacement here, and that takes care of this section. Now would be a good point to save, so I'm gonna hit save. Now when you do this, you might decide that maybe I don't like this sky, I want to use a different sky. Well, all you have to do is just find back the images of the skies that you have. So in this case, let's try this sky here. All right, so what do? Well, I just need to drag it into Photoshop. Let's use that method again, and voila. Now, of course, it's behind here because if you look, I actually have this layer behind my downtown layer. And I'm going to choose yes to commit that. All right, great. So now I just need to adjust this sky. I'm going to use this here. And you know, I'm kind of liking this sky. This sky is pretty nice. It's pretty nice. All right, good. But you can choose any sky that you would like. Now, what we want to do next is we want to put the car in. So we need to go to the folder that has the vehicles. So here we go. Now you can pick any one of these vehicles. I think this one will work best. So I mean, actually any one of these could work, but I'm going to use let's use the buggy. So again, I'm going to drag this in.
Sir, how did you put in the sky?
There it is.
Sorry.
The sky,
I
remember,
was busy taking out the background.
we just drag it in from the folder, right?
No, sir, I mean, like, how do you put it into the picture, like, as the background?
Oh, so it's already, you already should have the sky on your background already. So for example, let's say you have the sky in. There we go. Right. So remember that when you look in your layers tab, there we go. Yeah, when you look in your layers tab, you should see a list of all your layers, and you're seeing a lot more layers now because this is the complete project. So I'm going to dump those. And right, so oops. This is my foreground, and this is the sky. So if I drag another sky in, then it becomes on top. And I just need to reorder this and put this behind the cutout layer to see the other sky. You understand? So the answer would be to use your layers tab to order it, to put the sky behind your cutout.
Wait, sir, how did you put the first sky as the background? Did you just drag it?
The first sky came with the image. When you say the
sorry,
first
not the first
sky, what
sky. The one that you put it in.
right. So the one, so the first sky that you would have got came with the image. Then we cut it out. So you know you're left with the checkered. Then when you look in the folder that you downloaded from the internet, you see multiple skies. And what I did was to drag it from there into Photoshop. Right? And when you do that, chances are that image will be on top. So it would look something like this. So what you do is you put that layer behind the front layer, and then you notice it starts to go behind. Does that answer the question? No, not really. Repeat that.
Also, because it doesn't happen for me either. I don't know why. I have the sky, I have the downtown Kingston, but only the white background is showing, not the sky. Even when I rearrange it.
Yeah, but you need to cut it out.
Yeah, I cut it out.
You cut it out already? Oh,
Yeah.
so what?
All I'm showing is the white background and the
Right.
and the Kingston thing. So I do the cutout already.
Okay, so meaning, so you're not getting what? You're not getting the checkered? That's what you're saying?
I'm not getting the sky, any of my skies.
Even when you drag it into your project?
Oh no, I'm not getting the checkered like you say, sir. No, I'm not getting the checkered.
Okay, okay. If you're not getting the checkered, is possibly because you still have your background layer in your layers listing.
Oh, so
just turn it off.
Oh, okay, okay. I see.
Right. But basically you want to put your city in front of your sky layer. All right, any luck? All right, we're going to continue nonetheless so that we finish in the time. Because remember, we can always go back and watch this. All right. All right, let's go. Of course, it comes behind my downtown layer. I want it to be on top, so I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to drag it on top. I'm going to switch it off for now. Let's get a little organized here. I had two skies, so I'm going to call this sky Sky 2. There we go. So I have Sky 1 and Sky 2. I can actually just swap them out when I'm ready. All right, that might be something you might like. All right, let's look on this car that we have here. Now you have to make sure that I'm actually on the car layer, so I'm going to select the car there. Now the first thing is that the car layer it does not have a transparent background. It has this white background, so we need to get rid of it, and we know how to do that already because we remember the lasso tools that we used on the city.
All right, now before we can start manipulating this layer, we know that, oops, Photoshop will take this as a smart layer. And we know that we can't edit smart layers, but let's spend some time and talk about that a bit. You know, why would Photoshop, like, when you insert a new object, it would make it into a smart layer, and a layer that you can't edit? Well, just to give you a quick example, right? I'm gonna drag in the other vehicle. So let's, for example, I'm gonna drag this other vehicle in like that. There we go. And I'm gonna commit that, and you can see that this now has a new layer. Now, if I make this really small, and I know that it's small, if I zoom in, I'm using the control and mouse wheel to zoom in here. That's pretty small, and if you look at it, you say, oh well, it even looks like the quality is kind of lost there, because you know this one it was way sharper. Now of course I can just resize it like that and choose commit, and no problem. All right, it's now sharp again. Now it's sharp because as a smart object, Photoshop preserves all of the data within this image. Now let's say it was not a smart image, a smart layer. So remember how to convert a layer to a regular layer. You're going to right click it and choose rasterize layer. All right, great. No difference here. However, if I make this small, once I commit and I say, oops, I don't want it to be small, let me make it large again. It was a bit larger, and I commit. Then you might notice that it's way more blurry, and the reason for that is when you made it small, you totally squashed the pixels. I mean, think about how the pixels work, right? Remember, when you zoom in, you can actually eventually see the pixels, right? So just kind of zoom out a little bit. Right, so remember, when you zoom in, you actually see the pixels here. And what happens when you make something smaller, you are forcing the pixels into a smaller amount of pixel density. So before, when the image was much larger, the pixels that made up the tire, for example, this area, was that amount of pixels. But when you made the image smaller, all of this now has to fit in a smaller size. But guess what? The size of the squares doesn't change. So what does that mean? These squares are going to have to store more information in them, and the squares aren't getting any smaller. So what is essentially happening is you are crushing the image and losing detail, because when you enlarge the image, you would have already lost those that detail in those pixels. All right, so now that that example is out of the way, let me zoom out a bit. We're going to get rid of this car here. And now we kind of understand why Photoshop uses this smart layer by default, because it doesn't want you to change the size of the image and rotate it and do all sorts of things to it and lose detail. So you have to specifically say, okay, Photoshop, I want to rasterize. Once you do that, you know you have to be very careful, because when you change anything, you're not going to get it back. But in order to change something, in order to cut out an object, you have to rasterize it first before you are able to cut stuff out. Now, we're going to try out another tool here. We could use the polygonal lasso tool, our favorite tool, but because of the nature of this car, because it's on a white background, we're going to try another tool. So we're going to try the quick selection tool. Now the quick selection tool is actually a sub tool of the magic one. So remember, once you see this little triangular element here, you're going to click and hold, release, and then you're going to choose the quick selection tool. That's here. Now how does this tool work? Well, the quick selection tool, what I'm going to do is select this white area and drag. And notice I'm clicking and holding and dragging, and the quick selection tool is actually finding all these edges for me automatically, and it's actually going ahead and finding them. So you might say, oh, why didn't we use this tool all along? Look at that. Even before I reach the end, it has already selected just the white areas. Now, in case it did not select all your white areas, for example, notice that on the top of my car here, I'm going to pan over a little bit by holding the space bar, it has accidentally selected some of the red. So if I delete now, then naturally it's going to actually delete that part of the car, which we don't want. So I'm going to undo that. So what we have to do is deselect this area here. Now to deselect, you're going to hold, and I want to watch to show you this. If I hold Alt, notice that the symbol changes to a minus. If I release Alt, the symbol is a plus. So what you want to do is you want to hold Alt and you want to select the sections that you want to keep. So I'm going to click on hold and drag. And notice that the quick selection is trying to snap to these edges. There we go. I'm going to pan over some more. And I'm going to hold Alt again and add this selection here. So this is another method that you can use to highlight and cut stuff out. You can use the quick selection tool. And in this case, it works fine. But if we try to use it on shapes that are a bit random or shapes where the colors are very close, it's not going to work. Alright, so I'm holding Alt and mouse wheel to zoom out. Alright, so let me zoom in a little bit. And oh, look, see? You can see that the quick selection would have deleted this section. So I'm going to do the same thing again. I'm going to hold Alt and just try to get this in. There we go. Let's get that little part there. I'm going to do the same for the side of the light. I'm going to hold Alt and just kind of brush the edges here, hoping that Photoshop will recognize these edges. Now when you do it first, it might not look like it's snapped, but as soon as you release the mouse button, it will try and find its way. There we go. There we go. Alright. So let me zoom out now. Alright, that should be it. Now, of course, if I hit delete, you can see that it will delete all of these areas here. Now, you could have used the polygonal lasso tool or even the magnetic lasso tool to highlight the areas around it. But I just wanted to show you the quick select tool because that's also a pretty good tool. All right, I'm going to right click and choose deselect. And I'm going to use my move tool. If you remember, that's that tool right here. And when I use the move tool, I'm able to resize. So I'm going to resize this now. All right. Now while I'm resizing this, I'm going to position it. And this is where your architectural skills come into play. Let me move this over here. You want to make sure that you get the size right. So you got to watch your scale. And the angle is a little off here, so I'm going to just a tad. Okay, let me put this a little over there. There we go. All right. And now here's the thing. Remember, we made the car smaller. So once we commit now, we have essentially crushed all of those pixels into a smaller space. So once we commit, those pixels that we have crushed are gone. So now would be a time to ensure that, you know, the car is okay. So I'm going to choose okay there. All right, good to go. Now let's look at some other tools that we have here. Now what we're going to do is we're going to use the warp tool to kind of fix the perspective a bit. Now if you look closely, you will realize that, well, the car's perspective is kind of going this way, but the road is kind of going that way. So it kind of looks a little bit off, right? And this is where the perspective correction tools come in, which is great for architectural use, right? So to change that perspective tool, now you're going to go to image. Well, make sure that the car is highlighted because that is the layer that you want to actually warp. So once the car layer is highlighted, you're going to go to edit. And you're going to go down to transform and you're going to go down to warp. And what warp will do, it will change the box around it to these dots. And what you can do is actually drag these dots around. Now you have to kind of guesstimate where they would be in order for the perspective to roll out. And what I'm so what I'm doing is actually clicking, holding, and dragging to get this car looking like it's on the road. There we go. All right, I'm gonna choose yes to commit. Now the next thing we want to do is we want to do a shadow, and we also want to do some reflections, right? So now the idea of let's do the shadow first. And what we can do to get the shadow, architecturally we know that the shadow would be somewhere in this section here, right? And that would be what the shadow would be like. Now we could actually try and draw in the shadow, but we're going to use some tools that Photoshop has available to us to get the shadows done. Now what we're going to do, our game plan is that we want to take this car, duplicate it. All right, that's probably a horrible image of the car, but you get the idea. And then we want to color it black, and then place this black image of the car underneath the car so it looks like a shadow. So that's the plan that we want to do. So first thing we need to do is we need to make a copy of this car. Now to do that, we need, remember, this is the car layer here, and we need 2 copies of that car layer. Now to do that, what we do is we can right click, and then we can choose the option to duplicate layer. Now we want to name this layer car shadow. That's great. Now you might be saying, wait a minute, where is the car? And it's actually directly above the existing car, right? So if I use my move tool, make sure that is highlighted, and I'm on the car shadow layer, when I move, you will see that it has dragged out another car. Now we're going to use a technique called blending options to get this car to be filled black, right? Now to access your blending options on your layer, you're going to right click, you're going to say blending options, and you're going to wait for that window to pop up. Now once that window pops up, we're going to go to color overlay, and we're going to check that checkbox, and notice that once we check that checkbox, the car is actually now filled. We're going to click on it to highlight that color overlay to see the options. And what this layer style actually does is it really just allows you to fill that layer with a color, one flat color. So in this case, we want to fill it with black. We're going to choose OK. All right, now that's great. Now, of course, we want this to now act as a shadow, so we need to basically like squash it all the way down so that it's nice and flat like that. Now to do that, we're going to try out another tool. So we're going to go to edit, and then we're going to go down to we are going to go down to transform, and we're going to go to distort. Right, the last time we went to warp, but this time we're going to go to distort. And what this allows us to do is to grab these edges and actually distort the image in weird, funky ways. So what we want to do is to kind of distort the image like that, kind of like that, and like that. So now it's starting to look kind of like a car. Well, a bit. Let's carry this way. Let's carry this back. All right, now of course we need to commit this, so we want to make it look kind of like what we want, and then we're going to commit that. Now remember, once you commit it, you can't change it again, so you want to make sure you do that. And if you're not sure about it, then you want to use your history, and you want to go back up one step. Now of course the shadow layer needs to be below the car layer, naturally, because the shadow is below the car. So we're going to carry that down. All right, great. So now the shadow is below the car, and next we perhaps want to make this very transparent, because right now it looks a bit too hard. And to do that, we're going to go to the opacity, opacity for the car shadow layer, and we're going to get the opacity all the way down to there. Okay, now these settings we can always adjust that a little later. All right, it's coming there, but not quite yet. Next, what we want to do is we want to kind of blur this shadow a little bit. So to do that, we're going to go to filters. Now filters is an interesting element set of options in Photoshop, and what we're going to do is start to explore what they do. Now filters really manipulate the pixels on screen to do various effects. Now in this case we want to blur the shadow layer, so make sure the shadow layer is highlighted, the car shadow layer, and we're going to go to filter, we're going to go to blur, and we're going to try out, let's try a Gaussian blur. And what that is it's actually using this slider bar here to adjust whatever layer we currently have selected. And what it is doing is that it's making it more blurry, right? So the more we increase this slider bar here, is the more blurry that shadow becomes. Okay, it's almost gone now, so let's carry it back a bit. Yeah, there we go. So it's an overcast day, so we don't have a nice hard shadow, so that is fine. So we're going to choose OK. All right, so now we have a shadow. So that's without the shadow, and this is with the shadow. So the shadow definitely helps to ground it. Next, we want to have the reflection, and guess what? We're going to use the same approach. We're going to take the car, flip it upside down, and that will be the reflection. So we're going to do the same thing again. We're going to take the car layer, and we're going to right click and choose duplicate, and we're going to call this reflection. All right, so again, if I'm on the reflection layer and I drag this out, you will see that it's copied. Now in this case, what we want to do is actually mirror the car upside down. And to do that, all we need to do is to, I call it over squash, but we need to like squash this down. And if you're using the new version of Photoshop, you need to hold shift in order to squash. Hold shift while you are trying to resize. And we're going to go all the way down until we come on the other side, and voila, we have a copy that is flipped. Now the trick with this now is if we put it in position, it's not going to quite fit. So what we need to do, let's commit that change. We need to perhaps use the warp tool. So we're going to go to edit and transform and go to the warp option. And with that selected, what we want to do is kind of warp this so that only the tires will touch. So that's the tricky part of this. What you want is the tires to touch. There we go. All right, we're going to commit that. And then of course, we're going to put this reflection layer below the shadow layer. Let's put it below the shadow layer. That's much better. And then we're going to make the reflection layer, we're going to let the opacity be lower, just like the shadow layer. So we're going to adjust that down. There we go. And we want to get it ever so slightly. All right. So basically, this is where we're at now. All right, so we can see the reflection. Now what we want to do just for kicks is that we want to add a little bit of motion blur to the car to let it look like it's driving, you know, really fast, you know. And to do that, we're going to use yet another filter. So what we're going to do is we could add a motion blur to this car. Let's try and see if that works. So we're going to select the car and we're going to go to filter, blur, and we're going to go to, this time we are going to choose motion blur. Now we're going to get presented with options once again, and you can kind of see now that the entire car is blurred, and the blurriness is really controlled by that. And the angle, you can kind of see the car is being blurred at an angle that is controlled here.
Yep.
So what we're going to do is
we're almost
try
done
to increase this. Nah, we can also try to change the angle. I mean, this is kind of okay, but what happened is that the entire car is perhaps too blurred. So I'm going to cancel that. what we can do is we're going to use the same trick again. We're going to duplicate the car layer. So to do that, we're going to right click and we're going to choose duplicate. And we're going to call this car blur motion. And yet again, this is another copy, but this time we will add the blur to this layer. So we're going to add the blur and we're going to choose motion blur. Now, of course, this time it's added to this object here, but that's fine because we're not using this. And we can actually just put this object directly over this object. Then what we're going to do is we're going to use a new tool that very popular, but we haven't used it to the current time, which is the eraser tool, which is that tool right there. So we're going to pick the eraser tool, and what we're going to do is, well, remember how this works. So the options for the eraser tools are located up top. Remember, any button you select here, the options for that button is located up top. And what we want to do with this eraser tool here is let the size of the brush be big. So we're going to pick the size and we're going to make that big, even more big, maybe a tad more. Whoa, no, that's too big. All right, great. Next, we perhaps want to change the flow, which is basically the strength of the eraser. So we're going to empty that all the way down to maybe like 10. And then what we're going to do is we are going to erase half of the car. So let's use that eraser tool here, and what we're actually erasing is the car blur layer. And under it is the car layer, so it kind of gives the impression that it's moving. Alright, so when you're all done, this is what your image should look like. So good luck and have fun.
Alright. So, as I said, guys, today was a full class because we didn't get through the first part of the tutorial. So remember, so what we want to do going forward is that the working session is going to be primarily just for us working in the thing. And the lecture session would be more of talking about it, looking at the user interface and that kind of thing. But in order to make the working session, let's just say lightweight, we want to try to not have to push stuff down into the working session. All right, guys. So I know that today everybody was trying to get the access to the software and thing. For next week class, it's going to be the same Photoshop, so we shouldn't have a problem. But the class after that is going to be Illustrator. So it's the same thing again. Make sure you get the program before so that we don't have to like do part of the lecture in the working time. Anyway, guys, that is our class for today, right? And I'm going to see you guys again on Monday, right? Remember that I don't have you on Wednesday. All right, guys?
All right, sir. Nothing.
So what I want you guys to do for me is that you guys, I give you until tomorrow for those of you that hasn't finished getting the application yet. I give you until tomorrow because normally what I do, I just mark them at the end of class and you have the grade for the next class and so forth. So remember to hand it to me tomorrow, a percentage a day. So let's not let the work get less unnecessarily.
Sir, on the platform. Yeah, where can we find the video on the platform?
Where can you do what?
Find the tutorial video.
Oh, so the tutorial videos, you go to the class website. Here we go. And when you go to the class website, when you go to the CSA -utechjamaica.org, instead of going to students, there's this big red button here that's a class recording. So you just hit that. Then you look for the module, which is Digital Design Media. Here we go. And then the year, which is 2024-25, and you will see we already have one video there because this is what we did last week. So this is where you find the videos. All right, guys. There we go. This is what we did last week. All right, guys.
Gotcha.
All right.
What time tomorrow is the latest time to be able to submit?
Before the end of tomorrow. I hope that don't mean you're going to submit it 11:59 p.m. in the night.
No, sir. It's same thing with Gavin. I missed a lot of the class, so I need to watch back the video. So
No problem, man. That's the usual. The key thing is that you can't ask a video questions, right? So going forward, we're going to try and see if we can follow in class, just in case you have any questions. Because if you meet up, if for some reason when I click a button it works, and when you click it, it don't work, the only way to resolve that is to is to ask a question. All right, guys, that was a full class. I estimate that going forward, these classes should be less, especially if we take care of what we need to take care in the earlier session. So I will see you again next week, Monday. All right, guys?
Sir, one last question, sir.
Yeah, go ahead.
You said, like clicking a button and it don't work. I was trying to use the quick selection tool and it wasn't working for me.
Same thing. So when you use the quick selection tool, make sure that you're on the correct layer. That's the first thing, because all of these tools work based on the layer. So the quick selection tool is this one. And the way that it works, I mean, it's you pretty much just click and drag, and then it will kind of find the nearest polygon for it to snap to. You understand?
Yes, sir.
Make sure you're on the right layer. That's usually the trick.
Yes, sir. I know about that, sir. But
still not working?
I know about that, sir. But yeah, it doesn't work, and then it says nothing could happen because no layer is selected.
Exactly. So you need to. So on the right side,
I select the layer, sir. I select the layer, and then when I drag in, it's like it deselect the layer. So I don't know what to do.
If you make sure that you deselect, make sure you have nothing selected. Then make sure that the layer is not a smart. It don't really matter if it's not a smart object. It would still select nonetheless. And you say as soon as you drag, it just come off of the layer.
Yes, sir. And then it tell me it couldn't do anything because no layer is selected, and I press OK.
And you're sure that you have the quick selection and not the object selection?
Yes, sir. It's quick selection.
And you don't have the layer locked? You see there's a padlock here?
Oh, wait. That might be why. Hold on. Not clicking.
Still not clicking? Still not clicking?
Oh, sir.
It could be. Do you have any of your mask turned on? Like, do you have? No, you wouldn't have. No, you wouldn't have any masks yet. You only have a few layers. Okay, create a new layer by clicking on this button down here. Create a new layer, and then try and highlight something on that new layer using the quick selection tool. The rest of you are free to go, guys. So please, if you need to go, it's quite late.
Not me. I don't know.
All right, cool. Well, go ahead and share your screen. Let me stop sharing mine. Mhm.
I have a question.
You see it there?
Yeah. All right.
Yeah, so
Mm-hmm.
clicking and dragging. I don't know.
The size of your okay, increase the size of your brush. If you look at the top there, yeah.
This?
No, that one.
Oh. Oh.
There you go.
Oh.
Because the brush was so tiny. So
Jeez,
it was
yo.
I know. You see, these are why you do it in class. Exactly. Because these
Oh,
supposed to be a
God.
working
This
class.
is so embarrassing.
No, it's not. Come on. Yeah, that's why you have class. I'm telling you, that's the only thing holding back YouTube University. You need to be able to ask some questions because sometimes it's something so simple, you know. So to avoid having to dive down in the comments, you can just ask the person, hey, you know. Anyway,
Thank you.
no problem. All right, remember that the submission button, everybody almost gone, but I forget to tell everybody. Well, you can't miss the submission button. It's on the handout itself, down the bottom. All right. All right. Take care, guys. See you next time.